This is Gene Krebs.
Hi there. Oh. Whoop. Whoosh.
And we're high on Ohio.
We're going around this great state. We're talking to people who know how things work, who are making a difference. It's my great pleasure to be here today with Joan Englund, who is the Executive Director of the Mental Health and Addiction Advocacy Coalition, also called
the MAC.
The MAC. And that's a mouthful, and I'll just refer to it as the MAC from here on out. So tell us, first of all, how did you fetch up in this position? Because for those out there in the youth, they're kind of baffled as to how people get into positions of power and influence. So how did you fetch up here?
So I am an attorney by training. And when I was a young attorney, I began my professional career as a litigator.
You still are a young attorney.
Thank you. A young attorney. I was at a large law firm and was a litigator.
Okay.
But one of the things when I was in law school and as a young attorney, I knew I wanted to eventually become engaged in was the nonprofit sector. I wanted to serve in the nonprofit community. So when I was at the firm, I was also new to the city and wanted to find a way to connect with people in the community and learn the community.
So you're not from Cleveland then?
No, I'm not from Northeast Ohio. I actually grew up in Southwest Ohio.
Where?
In a little town called Beaver Creek.
Yes, in Greene County.
Yep,
yes,
yep.
Just a little bit east of Dayton.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. So I spent most of my life there. My dad was in the military, so we did some traveling, but most of my years were there. And then I went to school, both undergrad and law school, at the Ohio State University. So I was in the middle of the state in Columbus.
Okay.
And then I moved to Northeast Ohio to work for a large law firm after I completed law school. So I was looking for a way to engage in the community and kind of break in, meet new folks, understand what the key issues were in the community, and as a young litigator was connected with a mental health agency in Northeast Ohio through some mutual friends, and ultimately went on their board.
Okay.
And served as a board member there for a number of years.
Okay.
And actually, at that time, really began to understand what some of the key issues were for the mental health community and really what some of the big challenges were that were being faced by folks with severe and persistent mental illness.
Okay.
And I have stayed involved with behavioral health ever since then.
Okay. So what is it that you do here then? What's your organization about? And by the way, I should say that you folks, especially you, have a really good reputation down in the State House.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that and for sharing that with me. I run the MAC, as we call it, and have for 11 years. And our group was founded in 2003, but it came about because of some heavy lifting and thinking that occurred in 2002.
Okay.
And a group of mental health providers came together in 2002 and really began to have a discussion about how they weren't able to advocate the way they wanted to. And I've said to folks, it's no surprise. I mean, when could they do it? You know, in the middle of the night. I mean, they're running big agencies serving people with some really deep end needs. So they weren't able to advocate the way they wanted to. So they came together to talk about that and create a new model for how to engage in advocacy. And it's that model that we've had the pleasure and the honor to be able to move forward through the years. And that model is one where we bring together diverse stakeholders from around the communities. So it's not just the behavioral health organizations and the boards that are advocating on behalf of mental health and addiction disorders. Rather, it's hospitals and courts and the faith-based community and others out in the community that serve folks but may not provide behavioral health services. All of these entities and the people that work there see the impact of untreated behavioral health disorders every day. When I say behavioral health, it's mental health and addiction disorders. So they see the impact, whether it's in their emergency rooms, in their courtrooms, whether it's in their pews on the weekends, whether it's in their classrooms with kids failing, whatever the case may be. They all see the impact, and they have now all come together, and they advocate on behalf of behavioral health. And we do it in Northeast Ohio, where we have a hub of 7 counties, Southwest Ohio, where we have a hub of 6 counties. So we do local policy work in each of those areas. And then we do state level work in Columbus.
All right, so answer me this question. So for the people who have a personal interest in mental health issues, they are either a provider or either they themselves are a client or they have a family member who may have or have had mental health issues. How do you get the broader population, what I call Bobby and Betty Buckeye, How do you get them to begin to care about these issues and the impact? Why should they pay attention to this as a topic?
Right, right. When we're working with the general public, there's kind of messaging on a couple of different folds. One, many people have a personal experience with either a mental illness or addiction disorder. And in fact, the statistic shows that 2/3 of Ohio's population have somehow been impacted by a mental illness or an addiction disorder. So when you begin to talk to folks, slowly they begin to reveal what their personal connection is, and they can then talk about it. But the other thing that we do is, so we talk about it in a personal, this could have impacted your family, your coworkers. Everyone knows someone that either has a mental illness or addiction disorder. Your family, your friends, your work colleagues, whatever the case may be.
Right.
The other side of things that we talk about, though, or one of the other side of things that we talk about is the fiscal impact. So even if you don't know anyone that has a mental illness or an addiction disorder, and you probably do, you are involved from a financial perspective as a citizen of the state of Ohio and a member of your local community, and frankly, as a member of the United States or someone who lives in the United States, you're fiscally impacted every day.
How so?
So we know that a huge number of folks that present to their primary care doctor for heart problems or headaches or a range of maladies are actually presenting because they've got a behavioral health disorder. Something is going on. People show up in emergency rooms to get care because of a behavioral health disorder. Both of those things impact healthcare costs. So utilization in the wrong way, not because they're choosing to use the wrong way, but frankly, sometimes there's no other way for folks to access services other than emergency rooms or through your family doctor, which can be a great way. But that can impact your healthcare costs. The citizens of Ohio, what do we call them, Joe and Betty?
Bobby and Betty Buckeye.
Bobby and Betty Buckeye.
And I will caution you that if you ever use that phrase, people will know you've been talking to me because I only have 6 cliches that I use all the time.
All right. Well, Bobby and Betty Buckeye also pay for it when we have kids that don't access the behavioral health services that they need in school or while they're school age, and they drop out. Bobby and Betty also pay for it in regard to people that don't have adequate housing situations, and they pay for it in homeless services. There's a whole host of ways that Bobby and Betty are paying for it in the state of Ohio, even if they don't have a personal connection.
And so for, and one of the things you would think that at some point in time, and I'll discuss this, I have friends everywhere, and I'm sometimes baffled at the fact that I have friends on the right and the left. I will bring this up to the Tea Party folks, because one of the things you're talking about here is it's reducing the core need, one of the core drivers for public expenditures. If you are willing to, what you're saying is be penny wise, not pound foolish. And what we're doing is we're just simply so often, we end up treating the social symptoms of these problems rather than trying to get to the core issues of them. And if we could do so, we'd end up with a healthier, better community where our previous investments on people, on education, would be paying off to the gross domestic product, but also we'd be having cost savings going through the journal. Have you ever talked about this to any of the Tea Party groups, and have they, anybody at all?
I will tell you that this let's be penny wise and not pound foolish is something that we talk about a lot, and it resonates with folks on both sides of the aisle. Mental health and addiction disorders, I'm so happy to report, receives bipartisan support. It's not one side of the aisle or the other.
And you're hot, and I mean this nicely, you're hot right now. I mean, this is an issue that is moved up the public policy food chain. Why do you think that is? I mean, everybody, it's been largely ignored, in my opinion, for many years, but is this due to your efforts here single-handedly, or is it just, I know, but what's caused this, in your opinion?
Well, I'd like to think that we played a role in it, and I think we
Okay.
have played a role in it, but there are a number of stakeholders around the state who have been working on this for years with us.
Okay.
I think what there is, Gene, is there is a growing recognition.
This is a
for
driver.
Right, for a couple of reasons.
Right.
I think people are becoming more comfortable talking about the fact that either they or someone they know has a mental illness or addiction disorder.
Right.
I personally think that part of that is due to women who a number of years ago began to
Okay.
talk about postpartum depression. It was acceptable to talk about postpartum depression. And as a result of that, there were some open conversations. I think the next step then became depression. People began to talk about depression. It was acceptable. It was more acceptable. We're now moving to the point where we're talking about bipolar disorder or bipolar depression, I've heard it being called. I think we are, I hope we are on a track moving forward where it's becoming increasingly acceptable to talk about that, and soon we will get that way, I hope, in regard to addiction disorders. We're talking more about opiate addiction than we ever did because it's in our face. I think we're going to continue down that road as well. But I think it's not only that, I think it is also a growing recognition that we need to be smarter with the way we spend our dollars, and that by spending them wisely on behavioral health services, wisely on the front end, let's spend the money on the front end and not spend it in the emergency rooms, in the courts, in the jails,
Right.
In various other public areas when kids drop out of school, when
Right.
families become broken, when people lose their homes. Let's spend it on the front end where it's much cheaper and save on the back end.
Let me ask this question. There's a lot of myths out there about mental health, and the whole issue surrounding it. Can you point out a particular myth that really, really bugs you, and that you could then go ahead and pop and explode for us here today?
There's a number of them. I would like to do that too.
Okay, we only have so much
I know,
battery
I know,
life
I know.
in our machine here.
All right. Well, I'll pick one because it's talked about frequently. It gets a high-profile attention. There has been through the years this misguided notion and this stigma that people with a mental illness are violent.
Okay.
They are scary, scary people. Will snap, will hurt you, will engage in violent activity, and we know that's not true.
Okay.
What we do know is that of the violent acts that occur, only 3 to 5% can be associated with someone that has a severe mental illness. So it's a very small fraction.
is.
And in fact, what we know is that people with mental illness are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of violence. However, it does need to be said that there are situations where someone with a mental illness does create a heinous, absolutely incomprehensible crime, and those do occur. And we need to understand why they occur. Did they have access to services? Were they in treatment?
Right.
Were there substances involved? Were they abusing a substance? We need to understand that because it plays into how we address the problems in the system and the problems with people accessing care.
You know, we're no longer sweeping this issue under the rug. One of the things that comes a few years back, we were in Hawaii on Waikiki Beach, and there were just lots of homeless people with obviously some issues. And in talking to our waiter, we were at an outside facility and looking out there at the beach, he said, oh yeah, he says, lots of families back on the mainland will just simply, if they have a problem sibling, they'll just simply buy them a one-way plane ticket to Hawaii. And they know they're not going to freeze to death, but they're just out of sight, out of mind, and rather than trying to deal with the issue, they just simply what keeps you up at night? You have a large amount of issues on your plate, but what keeps you up at night here?
I would have to say it's a deep concern about people that don't have around them the supports that they need to thrive, achieve their full potential, or in some cases, Gene, even survive.
Okay.
And of that group, I worry particularly about kids.
Okay.
And of kids, I worry particularly about minority children.
Okay.
And of that group, I worry about minority males.
Okay.
It's that group that does keep me up at night, and the concern that they need those supports, whether it's a roof over their head and food to healthcare, including, most importantly, behavioral health care, along with physical health care, that they need an adult in their life who cares for them and can guide them and point them in the right direction, and that they have someone in their life that cares about education and can support them in obtaining an education. That's what I worry about.
You know, we encounter, I was having a conversation with a gentleman I'll be interviewing on Monday, Sam Gresham out of Columbus, about the fact that the unemployment rate for young black males is approaching 50%. And what you're saying is that, and I've never thought of it before, but if you're unemployed, you also generally have less access to certain care options. And this may also then lead to some self-medication issues that we're seeing too. That's not one that I had, thank you very much, I had not seen that one coming. Let me ask you this question. It's not really a fair question.
Oh, great.
Okay, all right. All right.
I love an unfair question.
This looks like an ordinary ink pen.
It does?
It's not. It's actually my magic wand. And I have a 5-gallon bucket behind me of pixie dust to back it up, too. All right. So I'm going to wave this over you. All right. You get to have the General Assembly of Ohio and the governor approve a issue, a thing, something.
Okay.
Anything you want to be. Plus, because of my undue power and influence, I managed to get that out, I can also guarantee you a 5-2 majority on the Ohio Supreme Court, okay, to back it up, all right? And let the record show, I am just kidding about this, folks, all right, please. But, all right, what would you like to have them do?
We need to adequately support behavioral health services in the state, mental health services and addiction services.
Okay.
We need to do it fiscally,
Okay.
through financial support for those services. We need to support them through policy perspectives too. There are a number of policies we need to be implementing, things we need to be doing in the state that don't cost as a lot of money. We need to be...
Can you give me any, for instance, I could take back to the General Assembly, and they still graciously will allow me to propose legislation on occasion and occasionally pass it too. So what would you suggest?
Sure. Well, there are some things, some smaller dollar things, some things that come to mind right now are things like respite care.
Okay.
Right? Things that we can be doing for the families you mentioned, or the families you mentioned, talking about in regard to Hawaii, Gene, where families supposedly send their loved one to Hawaii. First of all, I know many people that have someone with a mental illness or addiction disorder in their family, and those families
just wears on them.
It does wear on them.
Yeah.
I have a hard time picturing anyone I know actually putting someone on a plane with a one-way ticket.
We were quite surprised at this, but the waiter was very, and he said, "Oh yeah, he says I talked to him. I know how they get here."
Right, right.
So,
families do get taxed, and they get tired. And setting up programs, for example, where families can have a simple respite. Let's say they have a child with severe behavioral health needs. Giving the family just a simple break during the day can go a long way towards keeping a family together, supporting that family and what they're struggling with. So smaller policy type things, changing the way we talk about mental illness and addiction disorders. We've taken some steps on that in the past, and those are positive. We've changed language and statute. We've done other kinds of things. But simply owning how we talk about things, owning how we look at things moving forward, those can be significant when leadership takes those steps forward. And then the other side is adequately supporting the services. We've taken some terrific steps over the past year or so towards adding some dollars back into the behavioral health funding. We need to move forward on those investments. We need to use those investments now and take them the next step. They got us closer to where we were in about 2008, but only about halfway there. And the levels for mental health services and addiction services in 2008 were woefully inadequate then. So we
Okay.
need to invest on the front end so we're not paying on the back end.
Okay. For Bobby and Betty Buckeye out there as they're watching this and everything, is there any particular book you would recommend that they may want to read, or has there been a book you've read recently that has shaped any of your thinking on public policy, or just a book you've really enjoyed?
I have a whole pile of them on my nightstand that I keep
Okay.
starting and stopping, but I would say the books that I have found to be the most fascinating, that I've read fairly recently, I'm not sure Bobby and Betty Buckeye would want to read, but
Okay.
they were fascinating, and they might want to read them for the same reason that I wanted to read them. They were my general chemistry textbooks for General Chemistry 1 and 2.
Okay.
I take science classes for fun, and I so enjoyed the chemistry books, frankly because it gave me a greater understanding of the world around me.
Okay.
How it all happens. That is chemistry at its basic level is how does our world come about? And it's absolutely fascinating. For me, the other thing it did is it forces me to think in a different way, and I think maybe for Betty and Bobby Buckeye, it would give them a new way of thinking, as it did for me. It taught me new skills, and it taught me a different way to look at the world and question things as I move forward and understand other things.
Okay. Well, very good. And I will tell you, since I'm biased, because that was my minor in college.
All right.
It does help you understand that there is just simply, that's just the way some things are and how you can best deal with them. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. This has been Gene Krebs, and on behalf of the Center for Community Solutions, we're high in Ohio. Tune in next week, and I have no idea who we're going to be talking to at that point in time. But thank you again for tuning in.
For more about the Center for Community Solutions or their publications, please visit www.communitysolutions.com.